On the 3rd of January, the US carried out a drone strike that killed Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Quds Force, the Overseas Operations Unit of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. This followed months of escalating provocation by the Iranian regime. This saw the IRGC attack commercial shipping, conduct the largest disruption to oil supplies through the Aramco strike, and orchestrate the killing of a US citizen in Iraq. There is a pressing need to understand the IRGC and the ideology that underpins its activity in Iran itself and across the world. For over 40 years, the Guard has been the sharp edge of Iran's theocratic regime as it sought to embed its Islamist ideology at home and abroad. From Buenos Aires to Bangkok, the IRGC has conducted terrorist attacks, plane hijackings, maritime piracy, and hostage-taking to further its cause. Since its inception, the IRGC has nurtured Shia militancy across the Middle East, creating, arming, and radicalizing some of the deadliest terrorist groups in the world, from Hizbullah in Lebanon to Shia militant groups in Iraq. In Iran, the IRGC has been the main tool of state repression, a reminder that the Iranian people remain the biggest victims of this extremist and violent ideology. Most recently, crushing anti-regime demonstrations in November 2019, killing 1,500 protesters in just 2 weeks. Our new report, Beyond Borders, shows how the IRGC now operates as an institutionalized militia with a formal program of indoctrination that is saturated with a violent distortion of Islam. This comprehensive report is the first analysis of this primary source material. It provides new evidence exposing the extremist ideology behind the Revolutionary Guard, using internal training manuals used to radicalize recruits in the IRGC. We show the violent worldview they embody. The IRGC textbooks espouse a totalitarian Islamist vision that divides the world into the Dar al-Islam, land of Muslims, and the Dar al-Kufr, of non-believers. This rigid division, which rejects national boundaries, encourages violence against those who are deemed enemies of Islam. In Iran, this means greater repression. Any opposition from the Iranian people towards the regime is deemed a rejection of Islam, rationalizing violent suppression of dissent. The IRGC goes as far as to teach its recruits that Iranians who rebel against the state must suffer torture as well as death. These textbooks also raise the status of Ayatollah Khamenei to equal of that of the Prophet Muhammad in terms of responsibility for all Muslims and the expansion of Islam across the world. This excuses spilling Iranian blood and treasure on foreign battlefields to defend the regime's Islamist proxies and allies such as Bashar al-Assad in Syria. The IRGC is not just a military unit, it is a wellspring of Shia Islamist extremism that is only set to grow in prominence. The devastating civil war in Syria has offered an opportunity for the IRGC to accelerate its radicalization of Shia communities across the Middle East, taking the message from their training manuals to practice violent jihad on war-torn communities throughout the region. Just as the war in Afghanistan from 1979 precipitated a flare-up of Salafi jihadism, the consequences of which we are still dealing with today, the war in Syria could be the perfect storm for the rising spectre of Shia Islamist extremism. If political leaders have failed to tackle the ideology behind this growing violence, they could see history repeating itself. There are clear actions that governments can now take to counter this growing problem with the IRGC at its root. Based on the new evidence in our report, we call for a recognition of the IRGC as an extremist entity and the designation of the group as a foreign terrorist organisation. Technology companies are already prescribing Islamist extremist material, commonly associated with Sunni groups. But this highlights a need to focus attention on Shia extremist content online. Most important, Shia religious authorities need to begin the difficult task of developing counter-narratives as well, to expose this warped and violent distortion of Shia Islam. The findings of our research have implications beyond the question of the 2015 nuclear agreement and foreign policy towards Iran, which continue to dominate the policy debate. The IRGC and the extremist ideas that it promotes have wide-reaching influence, not only on Iranians, but on Shia communities across the world.